Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is a weekend edition. We have all sorts of things to talk about. Of course, this week we've been looking at a little bit more information we have about Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik and what happened in San Bernardino. Of course, we have the reaction to Donald Trump's proposal for a moratorium on Muslim immigration, and we have many other topics to address as well. But, of course, we also have Kelly Shackelford back with us, and so we're going to be talking about some of these religious liberty cases. So, Penna, always lots to talk about.
There's so much to talk about, and every week I'm surprised at what we talk about sometimes. And certainly President Obama reacted to terror attacks around the world and even here in the U.S., and I think that is what his weakness, even in his speech last Sunday night and in the way he responds to this, is what precipitated this proposal that many are calling outlandish from Donald Trump and others are jumping on board with, to ban all Muslims from entering the United States temporarily. So I know that's been a topic of discussion here on Point of View, and I'm sure we'll get a few more comments on that today.
Well, and I know people are waiting for your comments, but I might also mention that I started the week with a birthday, and I want to thank both of you for actually taping something. It was a complete surprise at one point, because the first one was Gary Bauer, actually, and I'm going, I'm talking, and somebody else is talking, and my microphone was not on, and so then, of course, I had a chance to hear yours as well as Tim Wildman. So the four of you, thank you so very much. I've probably enjoyed it, Kelly, a little too much, but it was really good.
I heard that that was the folks that thought of doing that figured that was the only way you could ever be surprised, because you're impossible to surprise.
Catherine said I'm difficult to surprise, and she got one up. And so, Andrew, Catherine, thank you for your help as well. But, Kelly, we have posted here that this year was the most hostile year for religious liberty, and it's a link to libertyinstitute.org. And I want people to read it in its entirety, but explain why you say that.
Well, I mean, we keep track. Number one, we release every year a book we called Undeniable, the Survey of Hostility to Religious Freedom. So these are just published. These are the ones that are in newspapers, that are cases, and therefore published in the case books. So it's really just the tip of the iceberg. But we've been doing this now for a number of years, and it's easy to say it's, the most hostile that we've ever had. And then everybody knows who's been paying attention, right? I mean, we had somebody go to jail for their faith this year in the United States. We had the Houston Five, the pastors, that were threatened with subpoenas by the mayor this year. We had Chaplain Motter. We had chaplains basically being threatened if they actually answer biblical questions with biblical answers, that their entire career will be destroyed. Now again, we want a lot of these, but the attacks are just pervasive. And in the article you're talking about, we not only talk about what's happened this year, but what's coming. Yeah. And we have in there, I know Penna was one of the first people who quoted the guy that we quote in there about how they said within the next 3 years, we are going to end religious freedom as a defense to all the LGBT issues. And so there's the next 3 to 5 years are really crucial. And that's kind of what we lay out in there, why it's really important, what is coming, and how people can actually do something about it and be a part of the solution. And so I think people realize it, and they know that we're in the middle of something really important. And when I speak at churches a lot, I'll say, we're in a Joshua 1 time where God had to say, be strong and courageous over and over again. And every time I do that, I watch all the heads in the church nodding up and down. I mean, they know, but those of faith know what's going on now, and it's a really crucial time.
We're going to talk about an election. I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen candidates say that this is a religious liberty election. So that says something about it as well.
It's,
right?
Yeah, it's huge. I think people know that this is a part of this whole battle is religious freedom, because if people aren't allowed to speak the truth, then there's really no hope. And that's kind of what's being assaulted these days is common sense, the truth, the Judeo-Christian, really foundations of our country. And are we going to keep it, or are we going to go to something different than what really is the basis for Western civilization?
The decision legalizing same-sex marriage across the nation really accelerated the religious freedom battles. And if this were a more sane election where we could actually talk about issues, we would be talking, sort of comparing all the candidates on the GOP side in their reaction to that. Are they going to accept that decision, or are they going to find various ways to fight the decision, to make it not perhaps just to limit it or something, or to allow certain states to go their own way? But that's, just because of the way the election is right now, that's not become a debate. It should be.
It should be, yeah. I mean, there's big differences. Like, Donald Trump has said that he's not going to do anything. He has no problem with the decision. He's not going to have it overturned or do it. And yet you've got people, Ted Cruz saying, here's exactly what I'm going to do. Here's a piece of legislation that just takes a majority vote. It strips jurisdiction from the Supreme Court on this issue and voids the decision. So you've got very different from candidates on an issue that's really important to a lot of people, but they're so sort of, hypnotized with, the theater of what's going on that we don't see a lot of discussion of these issues in this campaign. Obviously, the big issues, security, immigration, I mean, those are at the headline, but that doesn't mean that those are the only two issues that people care about. And so it is interesting, though, how that's all you hear about, it seems like, in this election.
One of the things I've said every once in a while is that I think Christians should be involved in a few activities. And one is I think every Christian should support some kind of religious liberty organization because of how crucial that is.
I guess coming in about, a month or so ago, that we had like $3.1 million to bring in before the end of the year in order to be, just at our budget where we could continue at the same rate. I looked at our numbers yesterday. We're turning away right now almost 90% of the requests.
Wow.
So even though we've tripled in our size the last 3 years, it's just not able to keep up with the need. And so we're helping as many people as we can. But we need to grow really even more than the $3.1 million. Good news is we're down to, I think, 2.1 million at this point. So we've got 2.1 million to go. And I would encourage people, a lot of times we're on at the very end of the year, and we're trying to help people remember those year-end gifts to Point of View, to the ministries they care about, obviously Liberty Institute, and just want to December. And so if you are a ministry and like your Point of View and you're making plans, or your Liberty Institute, you're making plans, you make your plans heavily off of what happens in December. So if people who care about these things and want to give, will give now this month, it will really help Point of View. It will really help Liberty Institute as we're planning, what we can do next year, because we have to lay out a budget, but until that December comes in, that tells us a whole lot about what we're going to be able to do.
Let's take a break and wait. Fire for being too noisy? Oh, you gotta be making this up. But we'll come back and continue our conversation. Penna, Dexter, Kelly Shackelford in studio with us today, as always, and we have a lot more to cover. We will do that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, the student protests over the last few months have not only been about how college administrations respond to student demands, but also been about changing the college curriculum. One example can be found at Columbia University. In a recent commentary, Dennis Prager reacts to some of these complaints. A young black undergraduate complained in an article in the Columbia Daily Spectator about having to sit in a history class. She complained that it's traumatizing to sit in core classes. We're looking at history through the lens of these powerful white men. I have no power or agency as a black woman, so where do I fit in? Dennis Prager begins by talking about the word she uses. This illustrates how successful the university has been in indoctrinating students with leftist ideas and rhetoric. Who even uses the word agency the way she did? And she talks about it being traumatizing to learn about the finest ideas and art developed in Western culture. She laments that the course is looking at history through the lens of powerful white men. This shows that race trumps wisdom, beauty, and excellence. Let's ignore the works of Shakespeare, Beethoven, and Bach. No need to study the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle. Dennis Prager explains, whereas the Columbia core curriculum originally set out to teach the history of the West and the best art and literature that has been produced, the left has succeeded in teaching that no art is better than any other. It does this by promoting multiculturalism. What was the reaction to the students' complaint? As I've mentioned in a previous commentary, most faculty and administration are cowards. The director of the core curriculum sided with the student but explained that you just have to learn to grow up learning about racist views. You have to wonder what is worse, a student who thinks she is traumatized by studying history or a professor who is sympathetic with such ideas. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in his weekend edition. If you'd like to join us at any point, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. And Kelly has mentioned the fact that they win so many of their cases. I think 90% is the figure I've seen you use before.
Over.
And so there you go.
Over 90%.
Over 90% of your cases are won. So we should be encouraged. But at the same time, each week, after we tell you some of the good news and some of the cases they've won, we talk about the new cases. And this one really makes you roll your eyes a little bit, doesn't it, Kelly? Because they're saying that a church was too noisy and violates the noise ordinance. Singing
Yes.
the great hymns of the faith is just too noisy for the neighborhood, right?
Yeah, this is outside of New Orleans. It's in Metairie, but it's in the parish there, essentially the county.
Mm-hmm.
They have a noise ordinance that says that if the decibel level that violates it is if you are speaking, if the sound is louder than a normal conversation, it's a violation. That's the noise level they have set. And you're like, well, that wouldn't work.
What about starting your car?
Starting your car, your dishwasher, the lawnmower, any sort of work on any building, much less demolition. Well, they've said, oh, no, we don't apply it to the lawnmower or to any of the other normal sounds. But not only were police sent to the church service, they have criminally charged the pastor, and he's now been fingerprinted. Okay. And so for those in the New Orleans area, be in prayer, maybe go down to the hearing. But the hearing is Tuesday. On the injunction, the temporary injunction, and we're representing this church. But literally, this will decide whether the church is shut down during Christmas. or else people go to jail, I guess. I mean, they have fingerprinted the pastor for a church service. And it's not some communist country. This is the United States of America.
Somebody has something against a church.
Yeah. I
mean,
mean,
doesn't want to hear religious speech.
Obviously.
Or the churches in Houston where they wanted to take their land, although you won those cases.
It's coming, and we hope and expect to win this, but we're having to fight it. And
so what's happening with them right now? Can they meet this Sunday, for instance?
No, this is one of the things. We went in yesterday to see if we could get an emergency order, which they're very hard to get. But the judge didn't grant the emergency order. He said, no, we'll just have the full hearing on Tuesday. Well, what are they supposed to do this weekend? So anyway, and they've already been out there twice. The sheriff and the officers have already been out there twice, and they've been criminally cited, and it's just going to get worse. So we were trying to get this taken care of as quickly as possible, especially before Christmas. But I have a feeling we've been contacted by Todd Starnes, and I have a feeling you're going to see this all over the country today, if it's not already out. I know you can get it by going to libertyinstitute.org. You can see it on the website, but I'm pretty sure that Fox News and others are going to really be carrying this, because this is a great story for Christmas, right? That shows the kind of conflict and the kind of thing that's going on right around the time of Christmas. And so hopefully we're going to be able to win this, but this is Tuesday, and I can't tell you what's going to happen also on Tuesday of next week, but a very big case we're going to file on Tuesday.
And just some reason to support organizations like that. And also, I think it makes a case, Kelly, that we've talked about before. When we talk about some of these, quote, political issues, pastors say, well, I just don't want to get involved. And I mentioned a minute ago, a rabbi in a synagogue, or whether it's pastors in Houston, or in this case, a pastor in Louisiana, find themselves in the middle of one of these battles that they didn't pick. But after all, the government or of some sort or the neighbors in the community pick that fight, and all of a sudden you have to defend yourself in court.
Yeah, and you wish that pastors would know a little more of our history, because this country was founded by pastors. Over half of the founders of the country were graduates of seminary. A lot of the those who fought in the American Revolution walked right out of churches, and so the pastors have always, it's the last, 50 years or however many years we've had pastors sort of really move back from being a part of our marketplace in a way that I don't think has been very good for our country. And we need pastors. Now, I know there have been some groups, David Lane and some others, who have actually began having meetings with pastors and encouraging pastors to run for office. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are starting to do that. And I love it. I think it's great. Walk right into the fray of the community and stand for biblical values and let people choose that for leadership. And so I really do hope more and more pastors wake up. We need their leadership in the country, or I think our country is not going to turn around.
Again, you can find a lot of it at our website, pointofview.net. Of course, go to libertyinstitute.org. Either way, you're going to find some of that information. We've made it available to you. And Penna, this is just an action item for all of our listeners to be praying about, and also consider what they might do to support organizations that are standing for religious liberty.
No, I think there are a lot of our listeners who go to churches where the pastor prefers not to discuss political campaigns, for one thing, some of the hot-button social issues. And I think this would be a story. This case would be something to bring to the attention of your pastor, if you have a pastor like that, just in a very low-key way. How can you be low-key about such an amazing case? But just, pastor, this is what we're facing today. This is what, another pastor in Louisiana is actually having to come up against. And, we've got to change the climate in this country. So, I don't know. I just think this case is it's outlandish. Really, it's over the top.
If I can pick up on that, we had Gary by phone, and they talked about the surveys that were done of over 400 conservative pastors.
Wow.
And what they basically found was this, that when asked, does the Bible address, and we pick first of all the hot button issues, abortion and same-sex marriage, the answers were yes. Overwhelmingly, the pastors agreed with that. Then when they came back and said, have you talked about the issue of abortion in the last year? And you think about Sanctity of Life Sunday and everything like that, only 50% had. Some of these other issues like the environment, religious liberty, gambling, things like that, again, at least 2/3 or more said that they, again, believe the Bible had some things to say about that. When you ask, have you addressed those issues, that was like in the single digits, 5%, 8%, things like that. So, Kelly, there's just a real need to encourage pastors to address these issues, and one that really does affect your church is this issue of religious liberty.
Yeah, and it reminds me, Kerby, of something. Years ago, the pastor at the church where I was going, he was a very respected man nationally, just a great, great man. But he was one of those people who didn't address these issues a lot. And he read a book, and it really challenged him about, I think it was called The Moral Mandate to Vote. And anyway, and he did a talk on abortion, and he showed the sonogram of his grandchild. And in that, he started talking about our responsibility. And he at one point he said, any Christian who is not voting and is not putting, the sanctity of innocent life, at the top is in sin. And he said, now I know people are going to tell me not to talk about this, the separation of church and state. He said, but I'm your pastor. I have to. And when he said that, there was a standing ovation.
Yes.
I had never seen that in that church, never seen it since. And I think there is such a hunger for the people have a hunger for their pastors to, and when I go to churches, when we go at Liberty Institute, and a lot of times we'll do the Sunday morning, and we'll just come in as a scout from the front line. Here's what's going on around the country. Here are people who are being faithful, who are standing. Here's what's happening. And it's very common that at the end of that, there's a standing ovation. And like last weekend, the pastor looked at me after, he said, I've never seen a standing ovation in this service before. And it just tells me that there's such a hunger for those out there, for their pastors to address these issues and to stand up and to bring the Bible to bear and to stand their ground and to say, this is relevant and the church is relevant and we're going to speak to these issues and we're going to stand for these issues and we're going to make a difference.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll take some of your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. As Kelly mentioned, we're coming to year end, and as you go to our website, you'll see where we have the button to click on, Changing Lives, Changing the Nation. We're convinced that if we want to change this nation, we change individual lives, and we change individual lives through the preaching and teaching of the gospel, presenting a biblical worldview, standing for our rights and liberties. And so, again, we encourage you to consider what you might do between now and the end of the year to support Point of View. And, of course, I hope some of you might also think about not just a one-time gift, but maybe even consider becoming part of our Truth Team 360 for $1 a day, $30 a month. You can support us on a regular basis. But we need to take a break. When we come back, we will get into some other topics, and that's coming up right after these messages.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 844-45-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 844-45-BIBLE. That's 844-45-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Just a few minutes ago, we were talking with Kelly Shackelford about their case, and it has to do with Jefferson Parish and Vintage Church. And if you'd like some more information, we're going to see if we can post the press release. This has just come out, so some of it's not even on your website or our website, but we'll try to give you that information because, as Penna said, this would be just a great press release to print out, hand to your pastor and say, are you ever concerned that we might find ourselves in a situation where the sheriff shows up and it isn't because we have too many people in the church, it's because we're being too noisy? Pastor, have you ever been fingerprinted before? Well, this is what's happening in Louisiana. I think that would be an attention getter, don't you think?
You know, we have naive people in this country. I mean, it's becoming more and more implausible to be so naive about certain things regarding national security, but religious liberty too. And so I don't know, this story, when it broke, and it's great to be able to break things here on Point of View that people haven't really heard about. I know, as Kelly said, as you said, Kelly, it's going to be all over the news over the weekend. But for this to really, truly happen, it's absurd. And I think it might wake up a couple of pastors and some church leadership.
And I will say, if people want to find the direct link, it's libertyinstitute.org/vintage church.
Vintage Church is the name of the church in Jefferson Parish. And in just a few minutes, when we open up the phones, I'll listen to some of you from Louisiana. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more if you've heard anything. Maybe this is the first time you've heard about it. We love to cover those kind of stories here on Point of View. Well, we have a lot more to cover, and if you want to certainly address these issues of religious liberty, feel free to do so. But Penna, last week, of course, we spent some time with you and Michael Berry talking about Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik. But we found out a lot more than we knew last Friday, not the least of which is that the FBI director says that these individuals, the two of them, were radicalized years ago. I don't like the term radicalized. It sounds like they were victims. No, they chose to follow a radical idea, but nevertheless, there was sort of the wondering of whether or not Tashfeen Malik, who came from another country, and then came to Saudi Arabia and met him, if indeed some of the things that she had in her mind affected him. But now we know that they were already pretty radicalized long before this took place.
Yeah, I mean, I had always wondered, how could that mother, the mother-in-law, have been so involved in their lives and not known? And now we even suspect that she may be somewhat radicalized. But yeah, they mastered firearms. They accumulated large quantities of ammunition. They studied how to make pipe bombs. They really planned for this. We know that now. We also know that, it was both of them, not just her. They were in touch with known Al-Qaeda affiliates. And Farouk's mom had received a commendation from a militant Islamic group. So there you go. And of course, Malik herself spent her formative years in Saudi Arabia. And that message on Facebook that we heard about right away, saying that she was basically honoring the ISIS leader. So we have a terrorist on our hands, and a very, very strong idea that may be impossible to implement and not very PC at all, but it certainly struck a chord here.
Wall Street Journal called it the dialectic, remember, the synthesis, antithesis, synthesis, that you had the underreaction from President Barack Obama led maybe to the overreaction of Donald Trump. And we need to kind of work our way through this because some of the questions that we'll get to in just a minute certainly relate to the proposal by Donald Trump. But Kelly, any comments about the radicalized individuals? In this case, Saeed Farouk is actually born in this country. So we have to answer a question not only about those who come here, but those who are already here and are citizens.
Well, I mean, I think the same theme or truths weave through this story and the political campaign. I mean, you're really inseparable, which is political correctness has gotten to a level at which most Americans are just sick of it because it's political correctness is stupid. I mean, everybody knows it's just stupid. It's like, well, I know that all the people who are committing these particular crimes happen to be, Arab. That would be discrimination. No, to not do so would be stupid, and everybody in the country knows that, and they're tired of the PC stuff that's gone so far now. I mean, it's one thing if it's dumb and it's just, okay, they can be dumb. I'm not playing their games. I'm going to use my brain. It's another thing when it's actually now costing people's lives. And I think that's where you have the Donald Trump enter to the vacuum that the president has left. The president has caused all of this. I mean, the only reason that we have ISIS is because of what President Obama did and how he evacuated the area. And how he runs around, refusing to say even the words, radical Islamic terrorism. And so it's created a vacuum. And then when he responds this last weekend by saying that gun control is the issue, I mean, it's just like everybody's head's exploding at that point because they're like, well, this is beyond stupid now. I mean, this guy, maybe we need to put him in a coat and wrap his arms up because he's just completely lost it. And so I think there's a mood in the American people that it's sort of like they've had all they can stomach and even hide on the PC, and they're just throwing up, and they just can't handle this anymore. And so almost anybody who will call attention to it and say this is nuts, they want to hear somebody do that, and Donald Trump does it. And so sometimes, a lot of times Donald Trump says it in a way that's inappropriate or, in a way that's a little too far. But that's sort of the stream that's running through all of this. It's the same thing. It's PC gone so far that it's endangering our lives and our country and a culture that's demanding a response to this.
We have a government that tells us things like there's a great vetting process involved, so we can bring in Syrian refugees very safely and there will be no problem. And because of all of the things that have proven our government doesn't always tell us the truth, people just don't believe that. And when something comes to our soil, like it did last week, you now get this jitteriness around the country.
Sure.
Because it was San Bernardino, California. It's just, a community and, just sort of where not really very wealthy people live, not very influential people. It's just a community out there. It happened there. So everybody knows they're not exempt. And so, it's just the natural reaction. I mean, a lot of us maybe would think through and say, okay, it's not possible to do what Donald Trump has suggested. But we can take that as sort of a beginning point to say, here's where the country is. At least a third of the country. They feel this way. What are we going to do about these very real, number one, fears and eventualities that could actually happen now?
Well, and think, if you're the president, I mean, what is everybody, if you go to the average citizen, what do they expect? They expect the president and our government right now to be coming up with a plan to deal with this. But the reality is they're listening to him talk and they're realizing he doesn't have a plan. He thinks the problem is gun control. We need more laws on gun control. And so they're like, there's not even a plan being attempted by our government to deal with radical Islamic terrorism. In fact, he wants to push in 10,000 new refugees from the very countries where the most radical terrorists are. And so I think people are, that's what this race is going to become, solely about that issue, until somebody, feels like this issue is going to be answered. And I think Hillary Clinton's going to have the same deal. I mean, I saw in a newspaper article today, I saw how she responded to the question that we need more love and less hate. Well, that's not going to do for an answer, okay? That's not a plan. That's not a solution.
One of her tweets was "Love Trump's hate," which puts the word Trump in the middle. Love Trump's hate,
and it's just that's just the kind of foolishness. Yeah, that's not going to do it. But people are demanding, because that's what they should be doing. That's their job. They should be figuring out what the plan is and how we're going to do this. And a good leader would step forward and say, "Here's our plan. Here's what we're going to do," and the country would go, "Okay." Even if it was a little off from their plan, they would at least know that we're moving forward. We're going to do something. We're going to try to protect Americans, and we're going to deal with this and not treat it like it's sort of I don't know, something divorced from reality, which is kind of how the president's treating it.
Sure. Penn and I have in front of us one of the articles that we have posted here. It's by Victor Davis Hanson. We'll talk more about it after the break, but there's a line in there, Penna, that I loved. It says, "The world that we are told about by the government bears no resemblance to what we see and hear every day." Kelly, that's what you've been saying. And after a while, we're being told, well, don't trust your eyes. Don't trust what you saw happening on the streets of San Bernardino. Don't trust what happened in Paris. We're going to tell you that this really isn't that related to Islam, or maybe reluctantly I'll call it terrorism, in the same way that I believe that there's Christian terrorism, one of my commentaries this week. So let's take a break. We'll come back, but I'd love to get your comments. Kelly's talking about the need for a plan. We've talked about the fact that, okay, if you don't want to have a moratorium on Muslim immigration, what's your plan? Love to hear your comments. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
Since the shootings near a Planned Parenthood facility in Colorado Springs, those who oppose abortion are being told to tone down their so-called hateful rhetoric. Not that the shooting is the fault of pro-lifers, say the more polite among the pro-abortion left. They say it's the atmosphere created by accurate descriptions of abortion and its accompanying practices that probably contributed to it. Vicki Cowart, president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, stated, "We share the concerns of many Americans that extremists are creating a poisonous environment that feeds domestic terrorism in this country." Vicky Saporta, president and CEO of the National Abortion Federation, stated, "Although anti-abortion groups may condemn this type of violence when it happens, the way that they target and demonize providers contributes to a culture where some feel it is justifiable to murder doctors." No doctor was murdered here. The perpetrator entered the Planned Parenthood clinic after having injured 9 people and killed 3. He is, at best, unbalanced, likely crazy. Really, check out his picture. Did he have a motive? We don't know. We don't know if the shootings, which took place outside the clinic, had anything to do with opposition to Planned Parenthood or abortion. There's a report circulating that the killer said the words, "no more baby parts," perhaps referring to the 11 videos successively released throughout the summer and fall, proving that some Planned Parenthood clinics harvest the parts of the babies they kill, and are compensated well for them. Here's what we do know about the shooter. The Washington Post reports he had a history of abusive and violent behavior, especially toward women, including 2 of his 3 ex-wives. He's even accused of rape at knife point. People who crossed his path recently described him as angry, exhibiting strange and unsettling behavior. No one reported hearing him speak of abortion. He was supposedly religious, but an ex-wife said he used his religion at times to justify abusive behavior. Yet, we hear that those who protest that abortion is not compassionate, but butchery, are somehow at fault. In response to this, Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life points out that 8 clergymen wrote to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. complaining about his protest activity and the tension it was creating. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. King asked, "Isn't this like condemning a robbed man because his possession of money precipitated the evil act of robbery?" In an opinion piece for Fox News, Father Pavone wrote of the moral and legal environment created not by pro-lifers but by legal abortion. He wrote, "All life is interconnected, and all respect for life is interconnected. Allowing child killing as a solution to a problem only makes it easier to think that ending the life of an adult can solve a problem. The pro-life movement cannot and will not apologize for speaking the truth." For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. Talked about, of course, Saeed Farouk and Tashin Malik and some things that we've learned about them. The reaction to Donald Trump's proposal, and I want to get into that in a little bit more because the other day we talked about the 1952 Inadmissible Aliens Act, which does give the permission for the president or others to halt immigration, as Jimmy Carter did, and as we actually did as a country between 1924 and 1965. But what about some of those issues? And don't forget that in the second hour, we'll get into some other topics, one of which is we have a Republican debate next Tuesday, and there's a real question about what First of all, who will participate in that debate? Second of all, what the topics are, and we know what one of them is going to be. That's what we're talking about right now. And I predicted a while back that might have been a yawner. Who would be paying attention to a debate on December 15th?
Yeah, well, you're Christmas shopping, but we're all more
that
focused
is going
on
to probably draw more eyeballs than some of the others because of all this controversy. So we'll be covering that in the second hour and, of course, next week as well. So, Penna, first of all, I mentioned a few of the articles we've posted. One comes from Michelle Malkin, National Security Profiling is a No-Brainer, and I think Kelly already kind of gave us a little of that. And then the Victor Davis Hanson piece, which I called Two Examples of PC, Political Concerns and Public Concerns versus Political Correctness. And sometimes you have public concerns on one hand and political correctness on the others. But what did you pick out of some of those articles?
Well, he was, the Victor Davis Hanson piece is kind of, I was trying to allude to it, but he does it so well, and it's posted at pointofview.net. But, you know, the Trump phenomenon and how it's grown is so much related, again, as we just said, to the way the administration has handled the threat of Islam throughout this administration, but especially most recently. And he said at the end of it, which I loved, he said, amid the crises and the present absence of reasonable or responsible leadership, if there were not a demagogic Donald Trump ranting and raving on the scene, the country would probably have to invent something like him. And it was very interesting. I read something that, just one comment that Bill Bennett, who's, an author, used to be Secretary of Education and Drug Czar, and he's got a radio show. He said he's not all that worried about the Trump phenomenon as many folks are. He just sees it as something that's playing out because of the mood of the country. I'm starting to get a little more nervous about it now as time goes on, but I do see the point. I understand this sentiment, this fear, this anti-PC positioning has to go somewhere, and that's where it's going right now.
Yes, and before, some of it was going to Ben Carson, because if there's been anybody in the country over the last 2 years that has really taken on political correctness, it was Ben Carson. He's kind of fading a little bit, but also then you see rising Ted Cruz as well. And, of course, Ted Cruz is really a lot bigger on the religious liberty issue, certainly, than almost anybody else out there. Is that fair?
No, I'd say so. I'd say he's kind of got an unfair advantage. I mean, he doesn't just understand religious liberty. He's litigated the cases.
Yes, he's talked about that on the stump many times.
And he's
maybe that's something we need right now.
He's argued 9 cases at the Supreme Court and some huge cases talking about international that where he had to oppose President Bush. He had to oppose his president and I don't know how many 100 and something countries. Nobody said he had a chance, and he won. That was an incredible victory that he won for national sovereignty and state sovereignty against other countries. So, yeah, I think the Ted Cruz thing this week has been the story that those who are watching politics are seeing, but very few other Americans probably know about. You know, Kerby, when you say the big issues next Tuesday, obviously, terrorism, all this, I think one of the other big issues is going to be, there's going to be a new sort of fellow front runner with Donald Trump, and that's going to be Ted Cruz. And so I think there might be some attacks on Ted Cruz because I think that he has been slowly rising, and now he's really starting to take off at the right time for him. For those of you who are listening, they don't know, you had the National Organization for Marriage endorse Ted Cruz, I think, 2 days ago. You had the key endorsement in Iowa, Bob Vanderplaats, and he came out and endorsed Ted Cruz. And that doesn't just mean one guy endorses Ted Cruz. That means all of his sort of network and all the people throughout Iowa got behind Ted Cruz. That'll be huge in Iowa. And Richard Viguerie, one of the most famous conservative, all the way back to Ronald Reagan leaders, an icon in the conservative movement. Yesterday I saw came out and endorsed Ted Cruz, and there's others.
Steve Deace would be another one.
Yeah, he has.
Steve King, who's congressman from
and the Magic 3 in Iowa, which nobody has ever gotten all 3 of those. A statement from Dr. Dobson endorsing Ted Cruz, but saying he is seeing a coalition. That's one of the news stories that, and you if you watch the articles, it's starting to be written about. And the question is, he's starting. Is he going to be able to keep that arc and grow it, or you've got some of these other people that fell back. I don't necessarily see the fallback probability in a Ted Cruz because his growth has been steady and slow.
Right.
That you've seen with some of these other people who go up and go down. So I think that's going to be the new story to watch for the debate next week.
Well, there's money and there's organization.
That's true.
So he's laid the groundwork. I don't know that. I mean, Iowa, it's always sort of an institution in American politics, and the Iowa caucuses are the first either primary or caucus that happen. And, some people are trying to play down Iowa. It's not as important as it used to be. But the Republican Party has done something this time that makes it more important again, because they've shortened up the whole primary process. Iowa is a month later than it has been in the past, and the convention is a month earlier. So we're compressed. And so what happens in Iowa is going to be important. Mm-hmm. And, Donald Trump is ahead in Iowa. I mean, there's one poll that shows Ted Cruz a little bit ahead of him, but for the most part, Trump is ahead. And so, I mean, I know we have listeners who are Donald Trump supporters, but they're also the social conservatives are concerned, very, very concerned about the candidacy, and we could talk about that later. If Donald Trump is to be stopped, he probably has to be stopped in Iowa, the first caucus, at least in the first three. Mm-hmm. New Hampshire and South Carolina and then Nevada.
March 1st, because then you have 12.
Yeah. And so that's, yes. I think you are going to see, people cognizant of that fact and that's why you see a lot going on. The people that are really concerned in Iowa about their state and how it affects the rest of the country. So that's why, we have to look at the other possibilities for beating Trump if you want to beat Trump. And that's where you have to start to, who can? Who could that be? Who could that possibly be?
I've seen a lot of talk recently that says if Donald Trump wins Iowa, he probably just sweeps everything. And so the question is, well, who could beat Donald Trump in Iowa? And the consensus is Ted Cruz. He has the kind of campaign structure. He has people in every county.
We were talking about Ben Carson maybe beating him.
Yeah, they have a lot of evangelicals who get involved in the process.
It's just there's the tentacles all the way down to the base that Ted Cruz has there that others don't. I mean, again, he's very smart. He's very strategic. I mean, the news came out recently that there was some college there that's gone defunct, and the Cruz campaign has now rented all the dormitories, 500 rooms for all the volunteers that are coming up and that are working Iowa. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on the ground there that we're hearing about. And so that's why I think they look at, and plus Cruz is closest to Trump in his very anti-establishment. He's proven himself, and so people feel like that's the best shot. But if not, I mean, you could have Trump. I mean, New Hampshire is going to be much more likely to be for Trump.
I think he wins that.
And then South Carolina,
then that's the question mark.
That would go back again as a possibility for Cruz. But nobody else that they're looking at looks like they have a real shot. When you look at not just popularity, but money in the bank, campaign structure, people on the ground, stuff that a lot of people don't pay attention to, Ted Cruz has the most money in the bank of any candidate. Yeah. And most people don't know that, but he does, and that leads to campaign structure and everything else, and that's why people are saying that's the choice. Donald Trump or Cruz looks like in the near future.
Going to take a break, and when we come back, we've got a whole bank of phone calls, so we'll start off with your calls. Those of you online, just wait, and it's a good time for you to visit our website, pointofview.net. Click on that button that says Changing Lives, Changing the Nation. If you appreciate what we do here, we'd love to hear from you. We'll be right back.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 844-45-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 844-45-BIBLE. That's 844-45-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View.
And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, would you like to join us? It is Weekend Edition, 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford, and we promised to give some of you a chance to join the conversation. So let's head out first to North Carolina. Sarah, thank you for joining our conversation today.
Hi, thank you for letting me be on the show, and thank you for your show. Are you there?
I'm listening.
Okay. I wanted to express my opinion that I feel like that not all Muslims are a threat to us, but I do feel that we definitely have a threat to our Constitution, to our way of life, because of our Muslim population and our growing Muslim population. We have currently, according to the Pew Research Center, we have about 2.75 million Muslims in the U.S. right now, which is not a huge part of our population, but it is the fastest growing religious group in the world. And of that, there's a little under 1 million of those that are children. We also have statistics that show that their birth rate is higher than ours, and then I'll say than any other group. And we have currently some judges in the U.S. that are Muslim. We know we have at least one Muslim that is Secret Service. We have Muslim in our military. And part of the Pew research that has come out fairly recently is saying that there's over 50% of the Muslims in the United States that feel that they should be able to live under Sharia law here in the U.S. So since we have Muslims that we know have questionable ties to militant Muslims, extreme Muslims that are in our government already, and we have a portion, a small portion, but a portion of Muslims that openly admit that they identify with extreme measures that groups such as ISIS take. I feel like that we're being naive if we don't see that over time, with increased Muslim population and demands to have Sharia law, that because here it's supposedly majority rule, if they become loud enough, large enough, strong enough, we can lose our Constitution, we can lose our way of life here.
Sure. And all you have to do is look at Europe and recognize that. Sarah, let me just jump in real quickly to mention, some people are saying you rattled off a lot of facts and figures, but the good news is we posted a piece today called Muslims by the Numbers, and it comes from Byron York, in which he pointed out that some of the comments by Donald Trump were quoting from Frank Gaffney, who's been on this program with us many times before, the Center for Security Policy, and some people say that his poll might be inaccurate. So then Byron York went back and said, okay, well, then let's look at the Pew study that you just mentioned. Okay. And here, again, you find that if you take the Pew study, you find that a percentage of those individuals, 12%, say that violence in the name of Islam could be justified. And so if you use just a round number of 3 million, Muslims, then, of course, Gary Bauer in his latest piece did the math. And so you are beginning to recognize that 12% of 3 million or 360,000 Muslims in this country, if this survey is right, and it's the lower number rather than the Frank Gaffney number, 1/3 of a million Muslims in this country believe that some kind of action, a jihad, is justifiable. Penna?
Yeah, and when you think about how few it takes to do a tremendous amount of damage, it's not like an army of Muslims. It's one or two deciding that it's, their mission to go out and kill people.
Yeah. And again, back to your point, Sarah, you talked about the 51% figure. That's again from Frank Gaffney. Some people don't believe it. I do, because I think they've been able to get some really honest answers. But if half the Muslims here believe in Sharia law, Kelly, doesn't that cause a problem to our constitutional interpretation?
Well, it's not consistent with the Constitution, right? The Constitution rules. Yeah, and this is why the immigration situation is, I think, so disconcerting to people. I forget how many months, everybody's seen this, I think, in the last week or two, but that there's been, I forget the amount of time they were looking, but it was 237, I think, was the number of people who have, as refugees, had come into the country in the last so-and-so months, and one was a Christian.
Yeah.
And almost all of them were Muslims. And you're like, wait a second, Christians are being beheaded over there. If anybody needs, protection to come to the United States, it would be Christians, but yet they're almost purposely, pushing through, people who are Muslim, right, instead of the Christians. And so that's what make you go, well, this idea that you're saying that we're just pushing for people who are in need, is not true. There's something else going on with our government and how they're deciding who gets to come here. And again, one of the other points I think was made by, Ben Carson, Dr. Carson, I think is a good point. He said there's really no reason for people to come here. There's no reason for them not to have a safe haven over there. Right. Mm-hmm. They really don't want to leave if they're, they'd
like to go back to their home.
Yes. And so the idea that we're saying that they got to come here and we've got to bring people from Syria really doesn't make any sense at all.
Sarah, you started a good conversation. Any final comments?
I think that you're covering my thoughts, and I appreciate it. I have deep concerns for our country, and I'm really hoping that people will get more involved and that they will look into the facts that we do have and start standing up and taking some action and cover us with prayer. I feel like we're losing a country that is under God, and I feel like that without that protection, we're doomed. Thank you.
Sarah, do you have do you feel like you have some candidates who are out there that might be taking your concerns forward if they were to win the presidency?
I don't know for sure. I'm watching. I'm glad that Trump is sounding like he's sounding, but I would not want him to be president. And I don't know for sure. I would like to hear more from them. And I would like just more proof and not just talk about, I could believe what they're saying, but there's so many issues facing our country. And I would want someone who could be a strong military leader, but a wise one, but also defend us here within our homeland, too. And I'm not convinced that I know who that is yet.
Well, that's why I think next Tuesday is going to be a great debate for a lot of these candidates, because this is going to be one of the the top number one issue that they're all going to be discussing, and so I think we're going to hear a lot of those plans on exactly what their approach is. My guess is it's unusual, Kerby, but usually we've always said the person with the executive experience, the governor, the whatever. This year the governors and all that, they're out. But it might be part of why senators again, you've got Senator Rubio, you've got Senator Cruz, Senator Rand Paul. They have to deal a lot with foreign policy.
Yes, they do.
And so they're going to be able to speak to that very well. I think we'll see that in the debate next week.
Let's take a break. We'll take some more phone calls right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, the student protests over the last few months have not only been about how college administrations respond to student demands, but also been about changing the college curriculum. One example can be found at Columbia University. In a recent commentary, Dennis Prager reacts to some of these complaints. A young black undergraduate complained in an article in the Columbia Daily Spectator about having to sit in a history class. She complained that it's traumatizing to sit in core classes. We're looking at history through the lens of these powerful white men. I have no power or agency as a black woman, so where do I fit in? Dennis Prager begins by talking about the words she uses. This illustrates how successful the university has been in indoctrinating students with leftist ideas and rhetoric. Who even uses the word agency the way she did? And she talks about it being traumatizing to learn about the finest ideas and art developed in Western culture. She laments that the course is looking at history through the lens of powerful white men. This shows that race trumps wisdom, beauty, and excellence. Let's ignore the works of Shakespeare, Beethoven, and Bach. No need to study the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle. Dennis Prager explains, whereas the Columbia core curriculum originally set out to teach the history of the West and the best art and literature that has been produced, the left has succeeded in teaching that no art is better than any other. It does this by promoting multiculturalism. What was the reaction to the students' complaint? As I've mentioned in a previous commentary, most faculty and administration are cowards. The director of the core curriculum sided with the student but explained that you just have to learn to grow up learning about racist views. You have to wonder what is worse, a student who thinks she is traumatized by studying history or a professor who is sympathetic with such ideas. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's head out to Georgia this time. And Kenny, thank you for joining our conversation. What would you like to add?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Kenny.
We're losing you. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Mine's about the gun control. I have several guns, and most of them are loaded, and there's none of them goes off until you put your finger on the trigger and pull it. I can put a gun in the middle of the road, and it can get run over, knocked over. My theory is they need to quit worrying about the gun control and start taking care of these people that does these crimes, because you have to pull the trigger to make that gun go off. Gun control is not the answer, because you can go on the streets of any town and give certain people money, and in 30 minutes they will bring you a gun back that you have no idea where it comes from.
Yes. You know, I did a commentary for next week in which I point out that we are having a growing number of law-abiding citizens that have decided to ignore some of the gun laws. And it's not just the criminals now. And of course, we've always heard the stories about people that live in places like District of Columbia that say, well, I'm going to carry a gun anyway because I'd rather pay a fine than risk getting killed. But Kevin Williamson talks about the fact that in Connecticut, they passed a law requiring registration of certain firearms and the citizens refused.
We go to Sunnyvale, California, right there in Silicon Valley, and they had a demand that they were supposed to hand over any firearm that had the capability of accepting magazines holding more than 10 rounds, which is like almost all guns, except maybe revolvers and a few things like that. And the citizens of Silicon Valley responded by turning in a grand total of 0 firearms. So, Kelly, you received an award a number of years ago from the National Rifle Association for the case that you brought before the court in an amicus brief. So what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think most Americans are aware of this. I mean, I think most Americans, when they saw the president respond to the terrorist attack in California with gun control, I mean, I'll bet 99% of the country immediately knew, what? They're like, he said it had to do with gun control. Oh, well, if there had been laws, then they probably wouldn't have gotten those guns. No, they would have had guns.
And they're not on a no-fly list right now in Connecticut. They want to have no one can get a gun if they're on the no-fly list.
Yeah, so what I keep noticing too is, and I keep wondering about the United States. The one thing that I do think might really be more problematic in the United States for these Muslim terrorists is that a lot of places in the United States don't have gun control. They have gun laws, but they believe in people having a right under the Second Amendment to own a firearm to protect themselves. And so, for instance, is this kind of stuff going to happen in Texas? Hadn't seen any of this in Texas. If somebody goes in and starts shooting up a place in Texas, a lot of people are going to pull out guns and shoot them. I wonder if the fact that people do have guns in a number of places in the United States won't make those places much safer places, and we might not see as much of this, and certainly we won't see a Paris situation, because that's just not going to go on. Something's not going to go on for minutes. I'm thinking around. I mean, Texas not only has, as some other states, not only has concealed carry, they even have open carry. So, there are people carrying guns that you could see. There are people carrying guns you don't see. And so I just really think that that's going to limit where these Muslim terrorists are going to want to go and try to do things in the United States.
You see, the other day they had the police chief of the District of Columbia on with Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes. And she said, the fact of the matter is that most active shooters kill most of the victims in 10 minutes or less. And the best police department in the country is going to have about a 5 to 7 minute response, which gets back to a phrase I've used on this program a few times before, that when seconds count, the seconds count to police are just minutes away. And you have the police chief of Detroit saying that he would actually defend the rights of citizens to defend themselves. So there seems to be a real change. It used to be that they would say, if you see a crime, call 911. Yeah. Or if you even see something, say something, call 911. Now they're saying, if you're in a situation where you're back against the wall, fight back. And remember when Ben Carson got in so much trouble when he said that?
Yes.
But now you have chief of police is saying these kinds of things.
No, and I saw that story you're talking about, and the main point of the story was that police had always been trained differently, and they've all now had to be retrained over the past, I don't know how many years now, for active shooters. And what they used to say is wait until the police are there, right? And they would wait to go in. And for instance, Columbine, I think they waited over 30 minutes before they went in. Now that is not what they're trained to do, because they know that they have to go in immediately, even if it's not as safe as they would like it to be. Because of the actor-shooter situation, they have to rush in the middle, and because they're going to save lives by doing that. So it is a very different training that it used to be for our police because of the situation that we have now, really with these suicide people. And we're talking about Muslim fanatics who think that they get to go to heaven by blowing themselves up and killing innocent people. And I don't know. I saw what happened under Bush, and I know that the belief in our experts is to not call out these people for the cowards that they are, and not to simply shame them. And I know why they're doing it. They're doing it because they don't want to look like they're against all Muslims. But I just think that it ought to be spoken to more directly. I mean, I think that this brand of fanaticism ought to be labeled as evil. It ought to be labeled as straight from hell. It ought to be labeled as cowardice to blow up innocent people. if you want to come take me on 1-on-1, fine, but this is not character. Anybody who would worship a God like this is foolish, and their God is pretty pathetic. And that kind of a conversation needs to go on, because when you shame something in society, you get less of it. And part of the problem is we won't talk about what this is. We won't address this. And I think it needs to be addressed worldwide. If there are a bunch of so-called peaceable Muslims, which I believe there are, they should shame this. They should speak to this, and the whole world should shame this. And you will have less kids gravitating that way. You'll have less of this occurring. And that's one of the things I think that's not happening across the globe.
I think the biggest reaction, the biggest concern that comes from the left when these things happen, these horrible terrorist acts, is not Islamic terrorism, but Islamophobia. They worry more that people will profile, discriminate,
or
somehow be prejudiced or persecute Muslims instead of worrying about Muslim terrorism. I think if we got it right, I think what Kelly just advocated would happen. I think we would see the moderate Muslims then come out and condemn their fellow Muslims who are radicalized. Right now, they're afraid too.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed in the White House right now, and this was coming out of the Justice Department, is that Loretta Lynch, who is our Attorney General, seemed to be much more concerned about Islamophobia than about Islamic terrorism. And there's some reports that came out that there's a real tension between the FBI Director, James Comey, and the President. Matter of fact, there's one story that's told where James Comey was sitting down, the President came up behind him and said, "Whose side are you on?" Because obviously James Comey has been willing to speak very clearly about what happened in San Bernardino.
And he knows wherever he speaks.
And once he spoke, notice that they then brought Loretta Lynch in right afterwards to try to soften what he was saying. And so you see a real tension right now, I think, between, say, the Justice Department, or one part of it, that is the FBI, and the other part of the Justice Department and the White House. And again, when you're more concerned about Islamophobia, I think you got the emphasis on the wrong syllable, right, Kelly?
No, the thing that comes to my mind is a famous, statement or whatever by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which is silence in the face of evil is sin. And, this is evil. And I think everybody expects the president to look at it, to call it evil, to speak to it, to speak the truth, and to say this is what we're going to do about it. And that's what's so disconcerting is this is the first time I can ever remember of anything like this happening where we've got a president who will not address the issue. He keeps running to side issues, but he does not want to address this issue. And as you mentioned in the article, it's almost like he's in a fantasy world where this is not really happening. And so that's why you've created this vacuum of these people who are like ready to explode, and Donald Trump walks in and says something to challenge that's nobody's speaking to the real issue here. So it's really a bizarre time that we're living. But again, I think all of it's ultimately being created. The gasoline that's igniting is being created by the president's lack of leadership and his refusal to address this issue.
Well, if you think our conversation has been interesting, you certainly need to look forward to the Tuesday night debate. I suspect most of the things we've discussed will be there front and center, and we'll be covering that. And we'll talk a little bit more in the last half hour here about that as well. But we have lots of phone calls. Some of you want to talk about Donald Trump. Some want to talk about the president. And others want to talk about how we pick a candidate. All that's fair game, and we'll try to get in some of those phone calls while we give some of our thoughts as well. Visit the website. You're going to find the articles, and while you're there, I hope that you'll consider a year-end gift. We'll be back right after this.
Recently, I've been struggling through a case of what I call the cruds. Pretty common thing for most of us, but if you think about it, not a good thing for those who depend on our voice as part of our work. Kind of like someone who writes for a living suffering broken fingers. But we press on. We do the best we can as God provides, right? Well, that's what I'm asking you to do today. Not to feel guilty or stressed about what you can't do, but to step up and do what you can to support the Truth Team at Point of View. We'd love it if everyone could give $100 a month. If even a small percentage did that, we could greatly expand our impact. Or $65 to underwrite a minute each month. But for many, $1 a day, $30 is a stretch. As God provides, do what you can and help us change the future through changing minds and hearts 1 month at a time. Give online at pointofview.net or using the Point of View radio app, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Weekend edition, Penna, Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. Let's head out to Illinois, WPEO. Janice, thank you for joining us today.
Hi. I just so enjoy your program. I just wanted to say I had just gotten an email about Donald Trump's immigration statement, and it says that what he says is not unconstitutional. It is the law of the land. Mm-hmm. And I know that you and your staff are good at finding out the truth about things, because I know you can't believe everything that the emails say. But this says that number 8 U.S. Code 1182.
I've got it right in front of me.
Inadmissible aliens.
That's right.
Written in 1952. Mm-hmm. Passed by a Democratic-controlled Congress and signed by a Democrat president.
That was Harry Truman. And I'll read it, just the section of Code 1182, real quickly. It won't take you long. Suspension of entry or imposition of restrictions by the president. Whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, the president may, by proclamation or for such period as he deems necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens is immigrants or non-immigrants to or impose on the entry of aliens any restriction he may deem to be appropriate. So this was passed by Harry Truman, and it was actually the justification for Jimmy Carter actually sending almost 15,000 different Iranian students back to Iran during the hostage crisis in the 1970s. So sounds pretty constitutional to me, but I'm sitting across from a constitutional attorney. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the original sort of allegation against Trump was because his first statement was kind of broad.
Yes.
And it would have, for instance, it would have applied to United States citizens,
people that would travel abroad.
Yeah, that traveled abroad.
In a sense, can be, there are situations.
And that would be unconstitutional. Yeah. But when it's referring to immigrants, immigrants don't have that kind of constitutional protection. And so that's why laws like this are fine. Now, the mistake I think Donald Trump did make is when he was defending himself, he started referring to FDR.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not a good thing to refer to.
The internment camps, the Japanese internment camps.
We put people in internment camps, which,
if he said Harry Truman, I think he would have been right on solid ground.
That's exactly
right.
Don't
you think?
Yeah.
Janice, does that help a little bit?
It sure does. Thank you very much.
Well, again, that's just something to think about. And again, we might say what we would want to do, because Penna raised a good question. We have identified, or that is the FBI has identified, the latest number I heard was 43, it could be higher now, of individuals who left this country, fought for ISIS, or were involved with some way in ISIS, but because they're American citizens have returned back to this country. And so they're actually investigating and following those individuals. Now, a very significant number of those were Somalis from Minnesota. That's where there has been another hotbed of situations. But nevertheless, you could even see that being an issue. But because they're American citizens and they have an American passport, and you might hope that those individuals are returning back to the United States because they're disillusioned with ISIS, but I don't think so.
But maybe not.
Yeah. So that's something to pay attention to as well. Let's take another phone call if we can, and this will get us into some of the questions that we have about candidates, the next two calls. So we'll go to Jim in Texas. First of all, Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
Very good. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, I want to bring up two observations and back them up with facts. And these are not politically correct because I don't believe in political correctness. That's what's destroying our country. I don't believe that President Obama is a Christian. I believe he's a Muslim, and it's relevant in these times because of what's happening. And here's some facts to back what I just said involving that. He's on multiple occasions praised the Holy Quran. Christians probably wouldn't do that. He denies the country was founded by Christians and that it's a Christian-based nation. He denies that. National TV, I don't think a Christian would do that. He would be proud to be of those facts, and they are facts, by the way, historical facts. He endorses and celebrates homosexual marriage and turns on the lights, and this display of excitement when the Supreme Court passed that.
Yeah, and that doesn't look so Muslim. That's where you kind of get all over the fact.
I'm sorry. The other issue, and I may crisscross my facts here. The two issues was that I don't believe he's Christian, and the second issue is I don't believe he truly loves America. And I'll have a whole list, and I'll do it quick here. But he supports Planned Parenthood and abortions. A Christian probably would not do that. He throws the executive orders to fund them if necessary, if Congress goes against not funding them. He thumbs his nose at Israel several times, and he's not backing Israel very much. A Christian wouldn't do that. Okay, now, as far as loving the USA and things that I don't believe, he originally stated and has kept to his word that he will fundamentally change the United States of America. He said it over and over and over.
Yes.
People applauded, people clapped, and here's what he's done towards that goal. He's almost there. National debt doubled, out of about $9 trillion. If you want to destroy a country, you raise your national debt. You want to do something else to destroy a country, you minimize the military. Done. Lowest level since about 1950 or so.
Sure, and I think we get the point.
When you put it all together, it's disturbing, isn't it?
As a matter of fact, I just finally had to say, okay, the list would keep us to the end of the program, but the point is really well taken that indeed you've got to say that this is a president promised to fundamentally change America, and is America different than it was 7 years ago? I think around the table, everybody agrees that it really is. Let's take another call because I think some of you want to talk about candidates. And James in North Carolina on the Good News Network, what would you like to look for in a candidate?
Well, thank you for taking my call. It's wonderful to speak to you. I think we're looking at the wrong criteria, and I'd love you guys' input or feedback to me, and I may be being naive, but I think we need, first and foremost, to look for a godly man or woman who will turn America back to God. We were a Christian nation, and we can have the best statistician, the best economist, the best military person. God will give us what we want. Let's have the best man or woman who will turn to the Lord in all their decision-making and turn our nation back. I think that we failed in this election. We're repeating something from 2 elections ago. There was a warning about who Mr. Obama was associated with, who he surrounded himself with, and who his influences are. I have not heard enough about the current candidates. Personally, Ben Carson and Ted Cruz, in that order, have been the most outspoken about their faith. And I would rather see, I don't believe that a president must know everything, be well versed on all these various topics that I frankly feel the world system has put our minds toward, and to where we forget the person's character. So I would like to see us look toward the character of a Christian, godly man or woman, first and foremost in our decision for a leader.
Well, again, you have mentioned a couple of people. Let's be fair, Mike Huckabee certainly has been outspoken about his faith as well. And just to take those three for just a minute, because I would have to say that all of us around the table know Ted Cruz. You guys know him better than I do. I've had a chance to be a lot with Ben Carson, and so I feel like I know him. And all of us around the table have spent a lot of time with Mike Huckabee. There's three individuals.
And Rick
Santorum. Again, let's be honest, Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee aren't going to make it. But, okay, let's at least give credit where credit is due. And Marco Rubio has expressed his faith, and I know Greg Laurie has been at his events and things like that, so maybe there's some others. But if you're really looking for somebody with godly character, you're down to a smaller group than just all 17 that we first talked about.
But still, it's more than, when you think about this election, how many godly men are actually on the stage up there.
It's incredible.
It's actually
much better
encouraging.
than usual.
Yeah.
And I would point one other thing. Well, he said something that caught my mind. James caught my attention, because it's something that I bet when I say this, you're going to look at me like I've heard that a lot too. There's a very famous guy in the conservative movement who was with Ronald Reagan, who always says the number one thing to look for in a candidate is who is around the candidate, because policy is people.
Yeah.
And when you're president, you appoint all these people. And that's, of course, Richard Viguerie.
Yes.
And Richard Viguerie, yesterday, I guess, or the day before.
Personnel is policy. That's
Personnel
right.
is policy.
He said that for years and years.
And
I agree with it.
And he endorsed Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
So what that means is he looked at who was around that candidate and he said, that's the guy. That's the guy that I'm seeing, all the people that I think are key, and that's what his policy is going to look like. So I think James is absolutely right. You need a godly man or woman, and you need to see who is surrounding them, because that tells you a lot about who they are.
I'm going to let our roundtable handicap some of the candidates in just a minute. We'll do that right after these important messages.
Since the shootings near a Planned Parenthood facility in Colorado Springs, those who oppose abortion are being told to tone down their so-called hateful rhetoric. Not that the shooting is the fault of pro-lifers, say the more polite among the pro-abortion left. They say it's the atmosphere created by accurate descriptions of abortion and its accompanying practices that probably contributed to it. Vicki Cowart, president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, stated, "We share the concerns of many Americans that extremists are creating a poisonous environment that feeds domestic terrorism in this country." Vicky Saporta, president and CEO of the National Abortion Federation, stated, "Although anti-abortion groups may condemn this type of violence when it happens, the way that they target and demonize providers contributes to a culture where some feel it is justifiable to murder doctors." No doctor was murdered here. The perpetrator entered the Planned Parenthood clinic after having injured 9 people and killed 3. He is, at best, unbalanced, likely crazy. Really, check out his picture. Did he have a motive? We don't know. We don't know if the shootings, which took place outside the clinic, had anything to do with opposition to Planned Parenthood or abortion. There's a report circulating that the killer said the words, "no more baby parts," perhaps referring to the 11 videos successively released throughout the summer and fall, proving that some Planned Parenthood clinics harvest the parts of the babies they kill, and are compensated well for them. Here's what we do know about the shooter. The Washington Post reports he had a history of abusive and violent behavior, especially toward women, including 2 of his 3 ex-wives. He's even accused of rape at knife point. People who crossed his path recently described him as angry, exhibiting strange and unsettling behavior. No one reported hearing him speak of abortion. He was supposedly religious, but an ex-wife said he used his religion at times to justify abusive behavior. Yet, we hear that those who protest that abortion is not compassionate, but butchery, are somehow at fault. In response to this, Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life points out that 8 clergymen wrote to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. complaining about his protest activity and the tension it was creating. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. King asked, "Isn't this like condemning a robbed man because his possession of money precipitated the evil act of robbery?" In an opinion piece for Fox News, Father Pavone wrote of the moral and legal environment created not by pro-lifers but by legal abortion. He wrote, "All life is interconnected, and all respect for life is interconnected. Allowing child killing as a solution to a problem only makes it easier to think that ending the life of an adult can solve a problem. The pro-life movement cannot and will not apologize for speaking the truth." For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And for just a few more minutes, Weekend Edition, and James raised this question, but earlier so did Sarah. How do you evaluate a candidate, and what kind of information do we need? We talked about this issue of personnel is policy. That's really key, and character is important. But how do we make our judgment about not only a presidential candidate, but senatorial candidates, congressional candidates, even people running for the state legislature? You need to have some voter guides because you may not know all of these individuals.
Yeah, I would point out a couple of different things for Point of View listeners because, I've been around a while and I had a lot of people ask for an endorsement from me. And I've made mistakes, and I picked right. And I really have figured out, at least, there's only one way to really know that a person who is running for office is going to do what they say they're going to do. Because I've seen a lot of people that are very sincere that they think they're going to do what they, I'm pro-life. I'll never back down from pro-life. You name the issue. And they're not lying to you. They really mean it. Mm-hmm. But they've never been in the situation with the kind of pressure that is going on, and they fail you. And so really, I've seen the only way to really know, people are going to think I'm going to say it's because they've been in office and they did the right thing. No, because that can be political too. They could do it because they're trying to make people happy by acting that way. But when the pressure's on and something else is more important, then it comes. The way to know is to find out what they did before they ever ran for office. So when I see somebody, for instance, if somebody's pro-life and the first contribution they ever made to a pro-life group or the first thing they ever did that was pro-life was after they started running for office, I'm sorry, but but unless they had a conversion, they came to Christ and everything after that, which is not likely, then that's not who you want. So look at what they did beforehand, what they did earlier in life. And then the other thing I would say that would help point of view listeners is look at the people that you really trust nationally. Because a lot of times people say endorsements aren't that important. Newspaper endorsements, I would agree. But I think it's different if, let's pick out somebody you hadn't endorsed yet, Dr. James Dobson, or somebody that you trust where they believe because they're going to know these candidates a lot of times personally.
Yes.
And so you're not going to have that opportunity, but they're going to know things that you don't know. And so when somebody like a Dr. Dobson or somebody who's a Christian, moral, they stand for the type of things you stand for, is willing to put their name with somebody over other good people even, that's something to really keep your eyes open for as well. But those are the two I would say to really look for in this election is what did they do beforehand? Were they committed to these issues before they ever ran? That's going to tell you a lot about whether they're going to be willing to fight and fight and fight for those issues when they're in office. And then look at people you really trust who might have more access and see what they're saying. And I think you'll probably get some good directionals there.
It's kind of hard this time because of the numbers.
Yes.
And all the people up there. It can get confusing. And I do agree, Kelly, talking about looking at this person and trying to make sure that they're really convicted about that and all of that. I think that's super important. But I think there's another part of that, and that is, what will they do? Will they stand against opposition to stand for this principle? Because sometimes, even though you're very sure that they are, for instance, pro-life or whatever, pro-family, but when the rubber meets the road, you've never seen them in office, so you've never seen whether they're really going to stand on that or vote right or speak or whatever, put a hold on something in the Senate. And so I do think that it's very dangerous to put an outsider in the nomination for president of the United States when they've never held office before and they've never had a chance to show you what they're made of as far as standing for things. So I think that's important. And something else right now, because I know a lot of people who love and support a lot of these candidates out there. We just mentioned people like Huckabee and Santorum and Carson. But I think now at this point in the process where you're moving toward a nomination starting to happen early next year, that you have to look at their viability. You have to say, okay, do they have any money? Yeah. I know you can raise money once you gain and win some elections, but do you have an organization? Do you have a strategy to win? Or are you just in here to make some points? And so we've seen many candidates come in and just talk up on the debate stage, but they've never had really the broad-based organization to win. I think at this point now, that has to be part of your calculation on who you support. You've got like 14 candidates in there that you could pick from. One of your criteria, just one, needs to be their viability.
And and I think to highlight what Penna just said about money and campaign structure and all that, the reason is this election is very different on the Republican side than it has been before, because it used to be that things were kind of spread out more, and you would have Iowa, and then a little while later you'd have New Hampshire, and then a week or two later you'd have South Carolina, and that was all you would have for the first month. This time, within the first month, you have 21 states go.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't be a guy with no money, no organization, and think, well, I'll just catch fire in Iowa, because there's not time for you to get the money in, to put the things in place. So it had been said for months ago, but I think it's true. If you don't have $50 million, you know, you can't run through about what's going to happen. And so that really does limit things when you're looking at the candidates, choices. And I do think that's something to look at, because there's people we love out there, as individuals and where they stand for, like Mike Huckabee and like Santorum and folks. And, right now they're at 1% and they don't have the money. And I hope that we get a coalescing of all these people around a good candidate, because the one thing that I think is going to happen this time that's different is, in the past, the Republicans have always had the one establishment candidate that all the establishment money was behind, and they were rolling along, and then all these conservatives fighting each other. And I think this time it might be the opposite.
It
and
seems to be.
That will be kind of fun to watch.
It will be. Just before we run out of time, let me also mention that one of the things I know you've been involved with for many, many years is the voter guide. You don't do that as much now, and you've passed it on to some others. But I just sat in a meeting the other day where we plan to do like we've done before. We're going to give you a map of the United States, and you click on that state, and it will post every family policy group in all the states that we know of, all the Concerned Women for America voter guides, all the Eagle Forum voter guides, the American Family Association voter guides. We'll even put some Chamber of Commerce ones in there and everything, so that when you click on your state, are going to go, oh, I got to do some reading here, because most of the people might know about the president. They might know their senator. By the time you get to Congress, less, and boy, the time they're trying to pick a state representative or a state senator or a judge, they don't have a clue. So we're going to try to do our best to try to give you as much information from us so that you can make good decisions. And you've been looking at those voter guides, and they're really helpful, aren't they?
Yeah, people, they might know the president and all that, but when they get down to those, state house and all those, a lot of times you don't know anything about those people. So it's very helpful to get where they are on those issues, and that helps you, because I think it's easier for people up at the ballot, but as they go down ballot, it gets a lot harder. And so to get help on that, and you can take those right into the voting booth with you. So it's very helpful. You can take your own research, your own stuff that you did, so that you can make an intelligent vote.
Well, that's all we have for today. And if you appreciate the information that we've provided today, or the information we're going to provide to you for election 2016, please take the time to click on that button that says Changing Lives, Changing the Nation. Donate today. We certainly need to hear from you. And I hope that you will make a generous gift between now and the end of the year. But you can make it right now just by going to the website, pointofview.net. That's all we have. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris. Have a great weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 844-45-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 844-45-BIBLE. That's 844-45-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.